Inside your spotlight this morning, we're chatting with the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs. The Honourable Ayanna Webster-Roy joins us on set. Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, Rockers. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. And permit me, I just want to wish my nephew all the best today as he sits his essay and all the boys and girls in Trinidad and Tobago.
Do you get nervous as an auntie?
Yes, but you know, I went through it last year with my last child. You know, so now it's not too much nerves, but quiet anticipation. He's a brilliant young boy, my nephew, so I'm expecting great things.
Nice, man. Well, all the best to him, and of course, all the students at an SCA today as well. All right, so let's jump into this. I wanted to take this from a different perspective than I've done the other ministers so far. When you got charged with the responsibility for gender and child affairs, when you got into the office and you had to take up the mantle and see the work that was done before you and the work was still to be done, what were some of the concerns that were laid on the table from jump?
From the go, ensuring that the state would be able to provide a safe space for persons who are victims of gender-based violence. That was one of the key things. Strangely enough, although it wasn't directly in my portfolio, but something I had to advocate for. I remember one of my earliest meetings with the NGO sector, they had asked for the abolition of child marriages in Trinidad and Tobago, and I was really proud when we were able to do that within the first term. And coincidentally, my portfolio didn't actually start up initially with gender and child affairs. I started with Tobago Affairs, Central Administrative Services Tobago, and then it expanded to gender and child affairs, and then the National AIDS Coordinating Committee. And that has been the portfolio. But specifically in terms of gender, I think for people to realize that gender was important and in focus in the government. So making sure that we were always out there, we were actually getting the agenda on the go and getting it into the mouths and to the minds of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, mainstreaming it, as they say. I think that was one of the key things that they expected of me early, and I might boast. I might be hopeful in my boasting that I think we would have done that. I remember someone said to me recently that it's the first time that gender has been so prevalent in terms of the portfolio and what we are doing and how we are impacting and shaping the lives of men, women, boys and girls in Trinidad and Tobago.
So tell me, in terms of when you say gender, we spoke about gender-based violence as one of the aspects of it. But for me, people who may still be unaware, what are some of the other aspects of gender that you deal with?
It's trying to ensure that we have a gender-just society. One, ensuring that we have policies and programs in place that ensures equity and equality, ensuring that there is reasonable, just distribution of national resources so that whatever the government has to offer, it positively touches the lives of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And you would know the needs will be unique. What a young boy in a countryside village might require would be different to the urban young boy. A woman who is living in a rural community, her needs might be different to a single mother in an urban center. So it's ensuring that we try to distribute national resources in a just way so that it could positively touch the lives of people. And beyond that, it's ensuring that Trinbagonians or citizens are able to live their lives free from gender-based violence. That is something, Rockers, I'm going to be honest, that we can't say that we have successfully achieved, but we are on the road towards achieving it through our attempts at public education and sensitization and creating awareness. I'm really proud that we were able to launch the country's first national strategic action plan on gender-based violence and sexual violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And that was a collaborative effort. Our government working alongside civil society, working alongside the UN and the European Union, and getting the full support and buy-in of Trinidad and Tobago, and it becoming Trinidad and Tobago's action plan, and seeing it roll out now and trying to see how it could positively touch the lives of the citizenry. That is good. The other thing I want to point out as we speak around issues around violence and gender-based violence and matters affecting people, for example, even climate change. We would have developed Trinidad and Tobago's first national action plan on women, peace and security. It was recently launched. And we are the first Caribbean nation to develop such a plan using the framework around women, peace and security and the principles around women, peace and security. And what we envisage is that through the National Action Plan and one of our signature activities out of the action plan, what we call SPICE-TT, you would see a targeted intervention in not only nationally but in some specific communities of focus. So, for example, recognizing what gang violence has done to communities such as the Beetham, Marabella, Train Line, Enterprise in Chaguanas, Maloney, and even in Tobago, in our own context, where we saw recently an upsurge in gun violence and gang violence in Tobago. We have also selected the community of Golden Lane and Mount St. George, which is in Tobago East. Golden Lane is in Tobago West. And what we're hoping is that by taking a public health approach and marrying it with a social intervention approach, that we'll be able to specifically and effectively target the issues around that contribute towards a prevalence of crime and violence, specifically gang violence.
How do we determine what those issues are?
Well, the key thing is getting into the communities and understanding the communities and working with stakeholders in the communities so that we could understand the pulse. And what Spice TT does is that it brings to the fore persons who can actively contribute to the response. So part of the plan is engaging persons who might have been retired teachers, persons who served in the national security framework, police officers, prison officers, and getting them as part of the response, coming in, helping us to through voluntary service as well as other type of service, to really get into the communities and work alongside persons in the communities, empowering our women and our groups in the community that work alongside women to also meaningfully contribute to the response. Women play a very integral and important role in enabling societies to be safe and secure. And we want persons to recognize that we're not just about cooking, cleaning, whatever. We bring more to the table, and our voices can influence positive change. And it's harnessing all the good that women possess and using women to help to influence safer communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, I want to just dress back a bit. You mentioned the Spice TT, that's actually rolling out now?
We're going to start rolling that out.
So it hasn't started as yet?
No.
All right, great.
Yes.
In terms of the SHAT plan, that would be one of the things under the SHAT plan?
That was one of the activities.
That was one of the activities.
Yes.
Give me an idea as to how it's been rolling out so far, the SHAT plan.
The National Strategic Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence and Sexual Violence. One of the key things that we would have done is establish what we call a National Steering Committee, as well as a technical working group.
Right.
And what they have been doing is that they have been ensuring that the different ministries and agencies, all the entities that play a critical role in ensuring that the National Action Plan is fully implemented, that they are doing what they're supposed to do. The National Action Plan would have represented government's largest investment in ending gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago, and it would also have represented the largest collective will of Trimbagonians towards actively pursuing the end of gender-based violence. So in terms of issues around prevention, if you have noticed of late, you'd have been seeing us partnering with different agencies and going into communities and talking about issues around gender-based violence, going to the schools, engaging our children, also going into communities of focus and engaging the groups and communities, empowering them so that they become part of the response and help us. I often say it's not just a government approach as is required, it's an all-of-society approach.
Of course.
Ending gender-based violence is all our business.
What are some of the recurring issues that come up when we talk to the community, when we talk to the schools? What are some of the things that come up that you say, wait, I've heard this in several places and we need to deal with this?
One of the key things is the issue around cultural acceptance, where people think that it's okay. Where in many communities, you might go to a community and hear somebody saying, well, if he and hit me, he and love me. And you might think it might be unique to this community. And then you go to other communities. You go to low-income communities, you go to high-income communities, and there's still this acceptance that if there isn't some form of violence, that is not really love. And it's trying to bring about a change in mindset that will contribute to a change in behavior. Also, for persons to understand that when it specifically comes to sexual violence, that it's not a matter of lust only, but it's about power and control. Because I remember we were working in some communities, and there was a play that was put on by an organization, and in the play it depicted a young girl being molested. And then there was a part of it where you went into the audience and asking people, and somebody asked the question, well, she was just a little girl in her 90s, what would have been attractive? but it's really about the power and exerting that dominance over someone. And I want to also highlight that while most times we focus on the impact on women and girls, we also recognize there's an impact on our men and our boys. And that would have also contributed towards us at the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, establishing what we call a Men's Bureau. That was our first to Trinidad and Tobago as well. And we also started having more meaningful programs and interventions for our men and our boys. So we hosted our Working Men's Forum. I remember it was last year, I think it was, or the year before, during 16 Days of Activism, I came to our TV station and we were having this interview when we were actually talking about the rollout of the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence and Sexual Violence. And after the interview, one of the guys, the camera guys, pulled me aside and he's like, you know, you all focus so much on women, but we have issues too, and we want to be heard. And that would have really jolted me into action that, you know what? Yes, we know women are predominantly affected, but if we really want to bring about the change that we want to see, we have to everybody.
Yeah, we gotta fix the man, so because the men issues is what affected the women at the end of the day too.
But the Working Men's Forum was such a beautiful event. We had one in Tobago, we had one in Trinidad, and the ideas that came forward from the men, they helped us to start shaping our Men's Bureau. And we're hoping to further expand that and to work alongside other agencies.
Tell us about the Men's Bureau, because for people who may have never heard about it before, what is the purpose of the Men's Bureau? What have they done so far?
So it's about creating an opportunity for men to get access to all the resources and support in a safe space. So for now, it's not a physical iteration of what it should be. In the long run, we're hoping to maybe have a space set up where you could drop in and get the information, access, you know, different services. But we have created an online platform where you could go on and, okay, what are the specific services available to men, how men can come together and support each other. We've had where all program officers going to the different radio stations and, you know, carrying conversations that directly target men. I remember also during some of our virtual town hall meetings, we had a specific session that looked at the mind of a perpetrator, a reformed perpetrator, and hearing that person share what would have contributed to him becoming a perpetrator, what were the factors that brought about the change in his life, and then what he suggests that we could do to help other men emerge better and, you know, not pursue a life where they're violating people.
Those stories are always very impactful and important.
Yes, and it helps us as policymakers as well.
I want to jump back to somebody, you mentioned that some of these services are available online. I can tell you what services are available for men. When we talk services, what kind of services are you referring to?
So apart from linking men to different services available to different ministries and agencies, for those men who have themselves victims of gender-based violence, there's what we call our Survivors Transformation and Empowerment Program. It targets both men and women. But through the Men's Bureau, we identified that as an avenue that men who have been victims could access funding for support, either for training and development purposes, or if they have a business and they want to expand the business, they could access it. And in those cases where you're accessing it as an individual, the funding opportunity is up to $10,000. And for those NGOs working specifically for men and boys who might have been victims of gender-based violence, the funding opportunity is up to 50,000 TT dollars. Also, coming out of leading up towards the launch of the Men's Bureau and coming out of the Working Men's Forum and all of that, we had one of our first men's conference in Trinidad and Tobago where we partnered with the Fathers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and we hosted that locally.
I actually attended that one.
Oh, that's how was the experience?
It was great. It was nice to hear men sharing stories and being honest and saying, you know, where they fell short or where they felt like they needed more support. And that kind of leads me to ask how the uptake or not has been, how people responding to the Men's Bureau and the services available online.
I think the men are accessing it, but I think what we make it even more powerful is when we get to that physical space where we set up, I'm hoping in the future when we set up in Tobago and in Trinidad an actual location that men could come to. I remember as an MP in Tobago East, I hosted what we call a hang jack initiative. And that would have happened because men in the constituency noticed I was rolling out something specific for women called Chai and Chat. And they said to the men, because I didn't attend, we give you this opportunity of a safe space. They said to my constituency office manager, we need some place to come where we could feel free to share offload and not be judged.
Yeah.
To just be a normal man with issues and someone to listen and not judge us.
Exactly. But and that leads me to ask about, is there a relationship between your office and the TTPS, for example? Because you mentioned men as victims, and oftentimes men aren't comfortable going to the TTPS to report that they are victims of gender-based violence because they are oftentimes shamed, or at least that's how it's been in the past. Has there been any work done in that regard?
So we have the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as part of the National Steering Committee, and we've built up a very close working relationship with the Special Victims Unit, the Victims Unit of the Police Service. As a matter of fact, when we launched Umbono, which is our in-house registry, and I'm really proud of that. That was done by our IT people at Office of the Prime Minister. Year to them, you know, after years of trying to get it done with through technical support with other agencies, we were able to get it done in-house.
Nice.
We now have the ability to see real time what is happening in terms of reports, and that has allowed us to work closer with the police service. So, for example, when we recognize that we're getting repeat calls from certain numbers, we could now reached out directly to the police and say, okay, we need to check, do a wellness check in this location.
Right.
Follow, go to this particular community and just do a drive-through. And that is allowing not only women who are victims, but men who are victims to feel a greater sense of security. And it allows us to provide a better, faster response, and also allows us to know which communities to target, what types of interventions that we may need to create for each community. And it's good for me to know on a daily basis and even on a monthly basis where the calls are coming from. How many calls are coming from women? How many calls are coming from men? What are the number of repeat calls? Which communities are the hot communities in terms of violence against men and women, and how to respond?
Yeah. Let me jump across, because we only have about a couple of minutes left. I want to jump across here. Time must fly when you're having fun. Jump across to the National AIDS Coordinating Committee. You said that you were charged with that responsibility.
Yes.
In terms of, as a policy maker, how have you dealt with that policy?
So I'm sure all of Trinidad and Tobago will be happy to know that we have finally finalized and got the approval of our HIV policy. Cabinet approved it. And the reason why I'm laughing is because for about 3 budget cycles at Standing Finance Committee, I was asked about it. But we got some setbacks because of COVID. And then we had to change the consultant, but we've finally gotten the approval and would be rolling out throughout Trinidad and Tobago, sensitizing the public on the policy as well as the action plan that would accompany the policy as well.
What are some of the key takeaways from the policy that would impact people on the ground directly?
Our strategy is to treat with a stigma. That's the #1 thing driving the rate of infection, because persons don't feel comfortable enough to come up forward and share the status or even to go and find out. So helping to break down stigma and discrimination in Trinidad and Tobago. Our policy focus around treatment, ensuring that persons who are infected access treatment and feel comfortable enough to go and access treatment, and also ensuring that we maintain that linkage between civil society organizations that act as the first responders through the establishment and the further support of our helpline, so persons know who to call when they need the support, when they need the help, to strengthen that civil society response to help us in terms of managing it. And I want to also highlight how important it is for us as Trinbagonians to develop an attitude of not just tolerance, but an attitude where we look at each other as people, regardless of, and you could fill in the blanks of different things. Look at each other as people worthy of respect, worthy of love, and worthy of decent service. I was really hurt when we observed World AIDS Day last year. And I got stories of one of our very strong advocates in the community who was hospitalized, and the type of treatment he would have received at the hospital. So that's why I'm saying it's important for us as Trinbagonians, as individuals, to look at each other and to see the man and woman in each other, and to give people the respect, the honor, the service that they deserve.
Yeah, and I think it's even doubly more important if you're in a position of service, if you're in a position where you're serving the general public. Minister, I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Such a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, ladies and gentlemen. The Honourable Ayanna Webster-Roy, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs. I feel like we spent plenty of time on the gender part.
Yes.
We didn't get into the child affairs properly.
You need to invite me to talk about child affairs and central administrative services to
me. So you had to come back. All right, no problem. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, we take a quick break and we come back with more on the Now Morning Show. It's the